So how can you sit here and in front of the Senate and say there are no names?
I said,
I named one today.
One congressman just said a name out loud in a federal hearing room that the FBI director told the Senate didn't exist. 24 hours before this room, Kash Patel told the United States Senate there was no credible information tying Jeffrey Epstein's trafficking to anyone else. Today, a member of his own party stood up in the House and started reading names into the record. Names the FBI's own documents are said to contain. So here's the open loop this video is going to close. If the information didn't exist, where did the name Thomas Massie just said out loud come from? On one side, Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky, a Republican, not a rival party trying to score points, which is exactly what makes this harder to wave off. On the other, the director of the FBI, sitting behind the nameplate that reads Director Patel, about to find out that a document entered into the Congressional Record doesn't go away when the cameras stop rolling. This case has outlived 4 attorneys general and 2 administrations, and every time it resurfaces, the promise is the same. This time, the full picture. This time, no more redactions. Kash Patel made that exact promise when he took the job. The most transparent FBI in history, he called it. Today is the day that promise gets tested against paper he didn't write and can't take back. Jeffrey Epstein has been dead since 2019. Every year since, someone in Washington promises the full client list, the full files, the full accounting. Every year, the promise shrinks a little by the time it reaches the public. What makes this exchange different isn't a new scandal. It's that the test is happening live, on camera, in real time, instead of in a press release written by people with time to choose their words.
So I've got 4 documents I'd like to introduce into the record. The first one is Jeffrey Epstein's sick story played out for years in plain sight. And Acosta is quoted in here saying, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone." The second document is entitled, "What Epstein's Bodyguard Warned About His CIA Connections." The third document is from Fox Digital. It's titled, "Epstein's Private Calendar Reveals Planned Meetings with Obama Admin Official CIA Chief." And the last document is Wall Street Journal article that highlights Ehud Barak's 36 meetings with Jeffrey Epstein. He was the former Prime Minister of Israel and head of military intelligence for Israel.
4 documents entered into the official record before Kash Patel has said a single word today. Not accusations, not theories, paper. The kind that sits in the Congressional Record forever, whether or not anyone in that room chooses to respond to it. Look at what's actually in those 4. The first is Alexander Acosta, the prosecutor who signed off on Epstein's original 2008 plea deal, the one that let him serve 13 months with work release. Acosta reportedly told incoming officials he was instructed to back off because Epstein belonged to intelligence. The second is Epstein's own bodyguard, flagging the same intelligence ties from the inside. The third is a private calendar showing scheduled meetings with a CIA chief and an Obama administration official. And the fourth, Ehud Barak, former Prime Minister of Israel and former head of Israeli military intelligence, meeting Epstein at least 36 times, including after his 2008 conviction. None of these 4 documents are new discoveries. They've been public in one form or another for years. A plea deal that's been litigated, a calendar that's been reported on, a Wall Street Journal investigation anyone could have read. What Massie did wasn't uncover something hidden. He took 4 things that were already sitting in public view and forced them into a place where a sitting FBI director couldn't pretend not to have heard them. The official Congressional Record, read out loud to his face.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one UC request. This is Judge Engelmeyer's decision from August in U.S. versus Epstein, stating the government's 100,000 pages of Epstein files dwarfs the 70-odd pages of Epstein grand jury materials.
One sentence from a federal judge, and the entire "the files are limited" defense collapses before Massie even asks his first question. 100,000 pages on one side, 70 on the other. And notice who put that fact into the record. Not Massie, but Jamie Raskin, the committee's ranking Democrat. Two lawmakers who agree on very little just spent 30 seconds agreeing on the same number. When that's the one fact both parties in the room don't dispute, it stops being a talking point and starts being the floor the rest of this hearing gets built on. 100,000 pages is not a footnote. It's a mountain of material nobody watching this video has been shown, confirmed to exist by a sitting federal judge, sitting in a government building somewhere, while the public gets told, year after year, that there's nothing left to see.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, I watched some of your Senate hearing yesterday when Senator Kennedy asked you, you've seen most of the files, who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these women to besides himself? You replied, according to the transcript, there is no credible information that he trafficked them to anyone else. You also said somewhere in the hearing and here today that the problem is that the case files are constrained by limited search warrants from 2006 to 2007 and that the non-prosecution agreement hamstrung future investigations. Those constraints only apply to Southern District of Florida. They do not apply to Southern District of New York, the location of the 2019 sex trafficking indictment, which produced many things, including a series of FD 302 documents. According to victims who cooperated with the FBI in that investigation, these documents in FBI possession, your possession, detail at least 20 men, including Mr. Jes Staley, CEO of Barclays Bank, who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked victims to, victims including minors, such as Virginia Roberts Giuffre, may she rest in peace. That list also includes at least 19 other individuals, one Hollywood producer worth a few $100 million, one royal prince, one high-profile individual in the music industry, one very prominent banker, one high-profile government official, one high-profile former politician, one owner of a car company in Italy, one rock star, one magician, at least 6 billionaires, including a billionaire from Canada. We know these people exist in the FBI files, the files that you control. I don't know exactly who they are, but the FBI does. Have you launched any investigations into any of these people, and have you seen these 302 documents?
20 names. Not 20 allegations, 20 categories of person, each one specific enough to be unmistakable if it's true. A Hollywood producer, a royal prince, a magician, 6 billionaires. Massie didn't invent that list. He read it off FBI-linked documents out loud into the permanent record, while the man who runs the FBI sat and listened to every word. Think about what it means for a list like that to sit inside FBI files for years without becoming 20 public names. It means the gap between what investigators know and what the country has been told isn't a small one. It's not a matter of a few redactions or a pending court date. It's a gap wide enough to hold a Hollywood producer, a member of a royal family, and 6 billionaires, and still be described in a Senate hearing one day earlier as no credible information.
Sir, I have asked my FBI agents to review the entirety of the Epstein files and bring forth any credible information, and we're working with Congress not only to divulge that information and produce it to you, but any investigations that arise from any credible investigation will be brought. There have been no new materials brought to me launching a new indictment.
Notice the sentence buried in the middle of that answer. Any investigations that arise from any credible investigation will be brought. Not have been brought, will be. A director describing a process that hasn't produced anything yet about a case that's been open for years, sitting inside his own building. Jeffrey Epstein died in 2019. The Southern District of New York indictment that produced these 302 documents is years old. Victims gave those statements to FBI agents years ago. Will be brought is future tense for a case that's already had years to become past tense.
So is the loophole here, or is it your assertion that these victims aren't credible, that the 302s maybe didn't produce credible statements that rise to a probable cause?
It's not my assertion, sir. It's the assertion of two different United States attorneys' offices from three separate administrations who investigated those same materials in lifetime.
3 administrations. That's the shield. Not, I looked at this and made a judgment call. A chain of past decisions the current director is standing behind instead of answering for. It's a strange shield for a man who spent years before he ran the FBI telling audiences that prior administrations had covered up exactly this file. The shield only works pointed backward. Massie doesn't let it rest there. He moves from who investigated this before to what do you personally know right now in the space of 4 short questions. And short questions are exactly what make this stretch of the hearing hard to watch comfortably if you're the one answering them. There's nowhere to hide inside a careful paragraph when the question is 8 words long and demands a yes or a no.
Are the 302 documents in the FBI's possession?
They reviewed all that, yes, sir.
And so have you reviewed those 302 documents where the victims name the people who victimized them?
If I personally know, but the FBI has.
Read that answer again, slowly. Massie didn't ask what the FBI knows. He asked what Patel has personally read. And if I personally know, but the FBI has, isn't a yes. It's the director declining to say whether he's read the documents that name the men his own agency is supposedly protecting the public from. This is what leads directly into the moment you saw at the top of this video. Hold that answer up next to the one he gave the Senate the day before. To Senator Kennedy, total confidence. No credible information. None. He'd bring the case tomorrow if there were. To Massie, 1 day later, the confidence is gone, replaced by a careful distinction between what the FBI has and what he personally has. Those aren't the same claim. 1 day earlier, in front of the Senate, Kash Patel said there was no credible information pointing to anyone else. Today, in front of the House, his own agency's documents are described as naming at least 20 men, and the director won't confirm whether he's personally read them. That's not a contradiction Massie invented. It's one Patel's own 2 answers, 24 hours apart, built on their own. And this is where it stops being about Epstein specifically and starts being about how the FBI answers Congress in general. If a director can tell one chamber there's nothing there and tell a different chamber the next day that he personally hasn't checked, which answer is Congress supposed to trust the next time this director says no credible information about anything else?
So how can you sit here and in front of the Senate and say there are no names?
I said
I named one today.
I said we are not in the practice at the Department of Justice FBI of releasing victims' names. That is not what we do. We are also not in the habit of releasing incredible information. That's not what we do. But multiple authorities have looked at the entirety of what we have.
Watch what happened there. Massie never said the FBI should release victims' names. Patel answered a question nobody asked. The actual question was simpler. How do you tell the Senate there are no names when a name is sitting in the room? He never answered that one. It's a well-worn move. Answer the safer, adjacent question with total confidence and hope the room remembers the confidence more than the substitution. It almost always works in a hearing that moves fast. It doesn't work as well on a clip that gets watched twice.
I got to move on here. Were you present when the AG had the White House event when she released the binders to the social media influencers?
I was, yes.
So if you're willing to meet with social media influencers who stood to benefit from the sensational and sad stories of these victims, will you meet with the victims as well?
The FBI will meet with anyone who has new information.
Will you personally meet with them?
The FBI and the professionals who are handling the cases will.
Notice the word that keeps disappearing from Patel's answers. Personally. He was personally at the influencer event. He will not personally commit to meeting the actual victims. Massie just has to ask the same question twice and let the two answers sit next to each other. Think about who got the personal audience. Social media influencers, invited to a White House event, handed binders, given photo opportunities with documents built from other people's trauma. Massie's question is the simplest fairness test there is. If you had time for the influencers, do you have time for the women those binders were built from? Patel's answer routes the question back to the FBI as an institution, as if the director of that institution isn't also a person who could, personally, say yes.
Were you instructed that it was important to release the documents to the Oversight Committee on the day of my introduction of the discharge petition to release these files?
I don't know what day that was, so no.
Well, they were released that day, and there were victims' names who weren't redacted because they were in such a rush, and the victims are not happy about that. Have you investigated any of the CIA connections? Have you seen the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein? And if you wanted to see it, would they show it to you?
Sit with that timing. The files went out unredacted, real victims' names exposed, on the exact day Massie forced the issue with a discharge petition, a rare procedural tool that needs a majority of the entire House to force a vote leadership doesn't want. Patel says he doesn't know the date. Massie just told him the date and what happened on it.
Well, I can speak for the FBI, and that's presuming there's a CIA case file, and I've reviewed everything that the interagency, not I, the FBI, that was provided to us.
Would you be willing to look at the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein?
If there is such a file, and if it has not already been turned over to the FBI will look at any new investigative leads.
Not yes, not no, two ifs in one sentence about an agency he runs, compared to the flat, unhedged confidence of there is no credible information, none, that he gave the Senate one day earlier. The gap between how sure he sounded yesterday and how careful he sounds today is, on its own, the story. A CIA connection is a different kind of question than an FBI one. It's not Patel's agency to answer for directly, and he says as much. But notice he doesn't say no such file exists either. The easiest, most reassuring answer available if it were true. He leaves the door open on both sides, which is exactly the kind of answer that satisfies no one and commits to nothing.
Have you made any progress on the pipe bomb investigation January 6th, and have you made any progress on the motive of the Las Vegas shooter?
As to the first, it's an ongoing investigation, and we have made progress. As to the second, sir, I'll have to get back to you.
All right, thank you. I yield back.
5 minutes. 4 documents entered into the permanent record. 100,000 pages confirmed by a federal judge. 20 names the director wouldn't say he's read. None of it required Massie to raise his voice or call Patel a liar. He read documents into the record and let a Republican FBI director explain himself to a Republican congressman on camera, which is exactly what makes it harder to write off as one side attacking the other. One day, there is no credible information. The next day, a name read into the Congressional Record in front of him. Nobody in that room needed to raise their voice. The documents did that on their own. The record is permanent now. It doesn't get walked back in a press release, and it doesn't disappear when the next news cycle starts. What would you have asked him next?